Hey everyone, Emily here and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be trying another recipe that I found online, and this one comes from TikTok. So I follow Bethenny Frankel on there, and you might know her from The Real Housewives, or you might just know her from TikTok. She has a pretty big following on there, and we are going to try another one of my favorite things to try, another cottage cheese recipe. So these actually sound pretty interesting. They are 3-ingredient bagels. And one of the main ingredients is whipped cottage cheese, and she makes them sound like they are really good. And I do love a bagel, especially in the morning, easy snack. And I think these sound pretty good and pretty high protein compared to maybe a regular bagel. So we're gonna give these a try. They seem super easy to throw together as well. And I'm really excited to see how they taste. So let's get started. So without getting into any of the toppings you might want to put on these bagels, they are only 3 main ingredients: all-purpose flour, baking powder, and cottage cheese. So I'm going to get started by measuring out my dry ingredients before I get my measuring cups all messy with the cottage cheese. So this starts off with only 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and I believe this makes about 4 bagels, so it's a pretty small batch. So I'll go ahead and measure out my 1 cup of flour into here. And then into that, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And this is what is going to give it the rise. And I'll just go ahead and mix those dry ingredients together. And then I'll set that aside. Now the next thing we are going to add, and really the final thing, is 1.25 cup of whipped cottage cheese. So I'm going to measure out 1.25 cups of the cottage cheese, and I'm going to put it in my immersion blender cup. And if you don't have an immersion blender, that is fine. You can use a regular blender, or you can probably just get away with using small curd cottage cheese and mixing that together. It might have a little bit of a different consistency, but I bet it would probably work okay. So I'll add that right into my immersion blender cup, and then that final 1/4 cup right here. And then I'm just going to blend it up, and this is going to give it a much smoother texture and probably help it mix just a little bit better as well. Now after blending that, you can see the texture is quite a bit smoother. I have all the big clumps out, and so I'm gonna say that is good enough, and I'm gonna add it into my dry ingredients. So I'll just use a spatula to kind of get everything off of the stick blender itself. I think I've got most of that off, and then I'll add what's left in the cup. And then I'm just going to mix this together until it forms a dough. And she does say it's gonna be a pretty sticky dough, so probably gonna need to flour our surface once we start kind of forming our bagels. But we'll see. We'll see how it comes out. Now at a certain point, you're gonna get to a spot where you can't continue to mix in with the spatula or a spoon. So I am going to move on to combining the rest with my hands. And it's gonna be kind of a sticky dough to work with here, but not too bad. Probably should have taken my rings off, but we're just gonna live with that. These are just for me anyway, so it'll be fine. Once you get everything kind of combined into one big dough ball, just do your best to get the remainder off your hands, and we're gonna move on to forming our bagels. So I have my dough all formed into a ball. I have a piece of parchment paper that I laid out here, and that's gonna keep the counter from getting covered in our bagel dough. And I am gonna add a little bit of flour onto this. Then I'm just gonna take our dough ball, kind of plop it right onto the parchment paper, and at this point I'm gonna get rid of the bowl. Kind of turn this upside down Get that coated a little bit in the flour so it's just slightly less sticky and easier to work with. And then I'm going to cut it into 4 sections. And these are gonna be our 4 bagels. So working with one at a time, I'm gonna form a ball. And then kind of poke a hole in the middle. And then just kind of stretch that out into a little bit of a bagel shape. And I'm going to repeat that with the remaining 3 sections. And there is our 4th and final bagel. At this point, they're looking kind of flat, but I am very hopeful that they're gonna puff up in the oven, and I think they will because hers looked really good. So I'm gonna wash my hands and get these ready for the oven. All right, I got rid of some of that extra flour on our parchment paper, and I'm gonna reuse that. I am just going to put my bagels right back onto here. And if you stop here, they are 3 ingredients. If you wanna add toppings, which I do, they are gonna be a few more ingredients. So the first thing to do is to add an egg wash so that everything sticks to the bagels, because right now these are very dry because they have that coating of flour. Nothing's gonna stick to them. So for the egg wash, I'm just going to take 1 egg and crack that into a bowl. And I'm gonna add just a splash of water to this. Give that a little whisk. And then I'm going to brush this egg wash right onto the bagels. And I'll do a pretty good coating on there. This should also kind of help the outside get nice and crispy. Now in high school, I actually worked at a bagel shop. That was my job after school and in the summer. So I am familiar with making bagels, and we did not do it this way. But I think that this sounds like it's probably gonna be pretty good. Once the egg wash is on there, you can add on your seasonings, and I am using Everything Bagel seasoning. And I will add a good amount to that. And in addition to that, I'm going to add a little bit of extra salt, which she does suggest doing, probably because there is none in the dough. Now these are looking really good and looking a little bit more like bagels now that we have something on them. I'm gonna pop these into a 375-degree oven for 25 minutes or until these are nice and golden brown on the outside and hopefully quite a bit fluffier. And then we can see how these are and how they compare to regular bagels you might buy at the store. All right, my timer just went off and I took my bagels out of the oven and they are looking really good. Still a little bit flatter, I would say, than store-bought bagels, but they have puffed up quite a bit. The outside looks nice and golden brown, and they smell amazing. So I'm gonna let these cool off for a few minutes, and then we're gonna cut it into one of these, toast it up, and see how it tastes. And I'm very excited to give these a try. So I've let these cool off for a few minutes, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut one of these in half and toast it up. Now I did the math, and when you divide that recipe into quarters, because it makes 4 bagels, you are going to get 9 grams of protein, and if you're using full-fat cottage cheese, I believe it came out to 165 calories per bagel, which really isn't too bad, and I would say a lot less than a regular bagel. So let's toast it up and see if the taste also makes it worth it. All right, giving these a few minutes in the toaster, and they are really hot. And the outside got pretty toasty, the inside not so much. I think I took these off of the baking pan a little early, so it was kind of steamy in there, but we're gonna try it anyway, and I think it's gonna be pretty good. It smells really good. So I'm going to add some cream cheese to like half of the bagel, so that way we can get a nice bite without some cream cheese and with some cream cheese and just kind of gauge the taste of it on its own. So let's give this a try and see how it came out. So I'm gonna try it without the cream cheese first. Now there's some big differences here. Definitely not as chewy as a regular bagel or as fluffy. So it doesn't have like the same bite, but it is really nice and crisp on the outside and the flavor is really good. So I wouldn't say that I'm missing much, and this would definitely do the trick, but let's try it with the cream cheese now. It's just as good. It's just as good. I would say if you're looking for something that's a little bit lower calorie and really easy to make at home, this is a really good, easy bagel recipe. It's not the same as a traditional bagel, but the taste is very similar. The texture is really pleasant. It doesn't taste anything like cottage cheese. It doesn't have a weird flavor or texture. It's really good, and I will definitely be making these again. So I would say great recipe from Bethenny Frankel. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell icon so you can get notified every time I post. As always, you can find the full recipe to this down in the description box below, along with links for all my social media pages so you can follow along for more cooking content throughout the week. If you'd like to see more recipes that I found online, go ahead and click this playlist off to the side. Hope to see you back here next time.